What is going on, everybody? So I'm making a video today because, you know, being in this hobby for such a long time, plus doing aquarium service and working in the retail aspect of it, working at a fish store, one thing that kind of stands out to me, and that's I see customers getting the same fish over and over again. You know the fish I'm talking about. I kind of want to make a video series of fish that I think are awesome but are underrated and often overlooked. I was kind of going through the shop today and I was just looking at the fish that we have here, and I'm like, you know what? That's a really good fish, but I don't see it a lot in this hobby. One of the reasons why I like working in an aquarium store is we're able to get different types of fish, and I'm able to look at the fish orders and pick out certain fish that I think that are a little bit unique, a little bit different. So I want to make a video focus on that. So I'm going to go ahead and go around the shop and show you a couple of fish here that we have in stock that I personally think are often overlooked and underrated. Let's get into it. Let's walk around the shop and let me go over some of the fish that I think you should keep an eye out for, and maybe we need to give a little bit more respect to. All right, let's go. All right, first up we have the striped fang blenny. I mean, what a beautiful fish. Just look at him. He's got the black and white stripes, bright yellow head. Let's do some quick stats on him. Yes, 100% reef safe, although they will go for some snails and things like that. And they are pretty peaceful when it comes to other fish as well. They max out about 4 or 5 inches. The lowest I'd probably go for an aquarium would be 30 gallons. I wouldn't go any lower than that. They aren't crazy active swimmers, but they do stay in the water column, unlike most blennies. Now, what's really cool about them, they call them fang blennies because they have 2 fangs on the bottom jaw there that they use for protection. They are venomous, so they can deal with more aggressive fish. They can defend themselves pretty well. And I've been bit by them. It's akin to something like a bee sting or an urchin sting, nothing serious, but they can definitely hold their own against most aggressive fish. Just fun to watch. They can kill snails, and then what they do is they kind of take over the snail shell and make that their little home, which is really cool to see. Just a great blenny to have in your aquarium. And what's really cool about this fish is they are aquacultured. So they don't have to take them from the wild. They are aquacultured, which means they can breed these guys in captivity, which is another bonus for me, just because we don't like taking stuff out of the ocean. And then there's less chance of getting some type of, parasite or disease. Next up, one of my favorite fish in the hobby, the blue jaw or blue throat trigger. I love these guys. Now, the reason why I like them so much is just because, number one, most importantly, they're reef safe, so I can have all my corals and still enjoy a triggerfish. Triggerfish are just cool to me just because they swim so differently and look so different than other aquarium fish that you see in the hobby. And they got tons of personality, they're fun to feed, they're active, and I mean, just look at this guy. I mean, the colors on him are insane. Now, they're pretty easy to take care of. They're not aggressive, although they could potentially go after some inverts. But when it comes to triggerfish, they're probably the least aggressive of all the triggerfish that you're gonna find out there, which is a big selling point. Also, I probably keep them in an aquarium no lower than 125 gallons. I think that's about right for these guys. What's really cool is you can pair them. You can get a male, which is this one right here. You can see his vibrant colors. That bright yellow and then the blue on the jaw there. You compare them with what we have here is a female. They're not as, the color isn't as nice, but they sure do go great together. One male and one female. If you have a tank that's big enough, I highly suggest doing that. It's really cool to watch the interaction. Next up, we have fairy wrasse. Just any type of fairy wrasse I'm totally down for. I think they're awesome. Look at these guys. Look at the color on them. These are 2 different species of fairy wrasse. 2 different types. I believe one of them might be a McCosker, and then one's like a ruby red or something like that. They all look very similar, but they have great coloration. They're active swimmers, which is very important in the hobby because you want movement in your tank, right? You want those flashes of color in your tank. They're very hardy for the most part, as long as you keep your water chemistry good and you're able to feed them appropriately. They're not aggressive. That's the good thing about fairy wrasses. They're not very aggressive. They stay relatively small, which is another big selling point. With a fish like this, I would say you want to keep it in at least a 50-gallon aquarium. You can have multiple in a tank. They seem to do well together. And again, we take a step back here. You can see just how much, this is a 29-gallon aquarium. We keep them in for quarantine, but you can see how much ground they cover when they swim. Very active fish. So if you're looking for color, if you're looking for movement, fairy wrasse are the fish that you want to go with. and I don't see them a lot in the hobby, unfortunately. This is a Pintail female wrasse, I believe, or a young juvenile, but just look at the color, the yellows with the pinks, very vibrant. They're very hardy fish for the most part, like I said, and they'll eat pretty much any type of meaty food. I just don't see these a lot in the hobby. I see other types of wrasses, and I highly recommend, if you have a more temperamental tank, I guess I should say, and you're looking for not a very aggressive style of wrasse, this is the way to go. Just imagine, you know, you got a tank full of these in there, some anthias and some chromis, how much movement and how much color you would have in your tank. It would be just amazing looking. Now these are the wrasse I most commonly see in people's tanks, the 6-line wrasse, the smaller wrasse here in this aquarium, in this tank, and then to the left there's the Melanaris wrasse. These are the wrasse that I commonly see in people's tank, and I don't recommend these. I know people say 6 lines are good pest keepers, and Melanarises are too, but they can get a bit aggressive, not only to their own species, but to other fish as well, and they get quite big. At least the Melanaris wrasse gets big. The 6-line, for its size, is very much a bully. Not saying that either of these fish don't have their place in the hobby. They for sure do, and they're great at pest keeping. But when it comes to keeping wrasse, I much prefer the fairies. Okay, next up, one of the fish I don't see a lot of, but I highly recommend, the lyre-tail hogfish. Man, oh man, look at this guy. Look at that two-tone body he has, the orange in the front. And this is just a juvenile, this is just a baby, with that black and the white in the back. Oh my God, what a cool fish. Now, these are reef safe. In my opinion, they don't mess with coral or anything, but they will, as they get bigger, tend to go after your invertebrates, so some of your snails and maybe even some of your shrimp. But I've seen full-grown ones in people's aquariums, and they don't really mess with any of the inverts, so it's kind of a chance that you have to take. But they're peaceful, pretty peaceful when it comes to fish their own size. And I don't see much picking on. Of all the hogfish, I would say they're probably the most docile of all the hogfish, for sure. And I just don't see enough of them in people's tanks, and I think that that's just a really cool looking fish, you know? I just think it's different than most saltwater fish you see. It kind of reminds me a bit of a PJ Cardinal with that kind of that bicolor body there. But yeah, again, completely underrated fish. I'd like to see a lot more of them in the hobby. And speaking of underrated, this Tomini tang. Everybody loves tangs, but nobody gives love to the flame fin Tomini tang. But I'm here to tell you guys, completely underrated tang when it comes to this hobby. Everybody looks at like the yellow tang, that bright color of the yellow tang. Everybody loves dory, so they like the blue hippo tangs, but even though those get way too big for anybody's aquarium, the Tomini tang stays a relatively good size. You can probably keep it in a 90-gallon aquarium for most of its life, if not all of its life. And they're a bristletooth tang, which is really cool because they are utility fish, which means they clean your aquarium. They suck up detritus. They're good at munching on algae. They're great at maintaining and cleaning your tank. And they got a really pretty white tail and the flame fin, that bright orange on it. It's still a really good looking fish, and they have really good personalities. They're not aggressive in the least bit from my experience. Maybe 1 out of every 10 will be a bit of a jerk, but for the most part, it's a really chill fish. Now, I know this is gonna be a bit controversial, but I much prefer the Target dragonets over the green dragonets, simply for the fact that these guys are much hardier and will last in your tank better long term. They seem to adjust to frozen food a lot better. They seem to be able to put on and maintain weight better than your green dragonets. And I mean, look at this healthy boy right here. I know they're not as pretty, quote unquote pretty, as the green dragonets, but they're much hardier, and they're still really pretty fish if you take a look at their markings. You'll have a much higher success rate keeping a fish like the Target as opposed to the green long term, so that's why it gets my vote. Now, don't get me wrong, these guys are beautiful. I think that they're an awesome fish, but I would only put them in a very well established aquarium that was very, very large, that had plenty of established pod population. Now, you can get these guys on frozen food. It's a bit tricky, and especially for long term, It's tricky to get them to thrive, but in the right environment, there's no doubt that these guys can do great, and they are absolutely gorgeous. I ain't hating on anybody who wants this fish. Just know you're gonna have your work cut out when you have one. All right, on to the next. We have the blue reef chromis. Now these guys are from the Caribbean, so they already got my vote right there. But you see a lot of the green chromis in the hobby. You see those everywhere. They're very common. You rarely see the blue reef chromis. I'm not quite sure why that is. Maybe they're a bit more difficult to catch or something, but I love the blue on them. I love the blue with the black. I think it's electric blue. It stands out, and to school these in a tank, man, I think they look great. If you pair them, especially with like an anthias style fish or something like that, they look great. Again, that electric blue cuts through. If you run a lot of blue lights, you might not be able to appreciate them as much because they kind of blend in. But if you run a lot of white lights, that blue pops, man, I'm telling you. And they're relatively peaceful fish when it comes to other fish with their own kind. They can be a little bit territorial, but they're good in groups. Now I know most people go for these, the green chromis, and they are a great fish. I do like them as well. It's very common to see them in the hobby, and I still think that, I still love them. And obviously their price point is really good, so that might be a reason why you see more of them as well. But I just want to give a little bit of love to the blue reef chromis. And when we're designing our tank, we should be designing it to make it unique and different. And I think the blue reef chromis definitely fits that bill. And yes, you can mix and match these two. I've done it before in aquariums. They seem to get along just fine. One more thing I want to add is that the blue reef chromis is less likely than these guys, the green chromis, to come in with uranema and some other fish diseases. So that's a big selling point too. All right, so there you have it. Fish that I think are often overlooked and underrated. Now, I know a lot of fish stores only keep certain fish in because what sells is what dictates what they bring in. So that's why you see a lot of commonality in fish stores and a lot of the same repetitive fish every time you go there. All right, if you have any fish that you think is underrated and overlooked, please write it down in the comments. I'm gonna continue to do videos on this topic because there are tons of fish that I would totally recommend for people that I don't think people are familiar with. But I gotta get going. There's plenty to do around here. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.